Welcome back, everybody, to Pistons, Twins, and Turbines. I'm Dave, and today we are going to actually be jumping in the 172, and we're going to be going through our flight sim pilot training series. We're outside the aircraft, and I'm not going to do a huge walk around just because it's not really something you do in the sim, but just for general knowledge, I'll go over it, show you how in the real world we do things. I'm not going to do the full thing because I can't open up hatches. I can't really check the oil and all that stuff. But I'll just show you basically what we're thinking and what we do as pilots as we walk up to an aircraft. We got the 172 sitting here. As I walk up to an aircraft, I just generally look at it. I look it over from a distance. I make sure that it's not teetered to one side, that there's not a flat tire, that the nose strut and landing gear looks fine. It's not sunken down. That there's nothing to mess with the back landing gear. That everything looks appropriate. There's no huge dents in it. A truck hasn't ran into it, or something else, bird nests, any of those type of things that you can see as you walk up to it. So just get a general impression of the aircraft. So you approach the front. I always like to start in the front. And what I check is the propeller. And what you're doing is you're checking the leading edges of that propeller, and you're making sure there's no dents and dings or cracks or anything that would make a no-go situation. Then you're checking the spinner, making sure the spinner's tight, that it's on there, and that it's not going to fly off during flight. And the front is your cowling, and this is your actual engine. Those are your cylinders in there. And you take a peek in there, and you're looking for any bird nests, squirrels that might have made a home in there, no acorns. You don't want anything like that inside there. Underneath right here, right behind the prop, you can see the air filter. So you check that air filter, make sure it's not dirty, that it's not clogged up or anything like that. Some planes you can actually open up the cowling on both sides. On the 172 you can't. You actually have a little spot on the other side for your dipstick for your oil, and that's about as much as you can do. But you can reach your hand down here, kind of shake the pipe back and forth, make sure that it's not loose. Coming to the side of the aircraft, you can check your tire. You're going to open up this little port down here. It's an inspection port, and you can check your brakes. On the front, you're making sure that your wing struts are tight. You're literally going up and just shaking them and making sure that they're not loose. Look at all the bolts, make sure everything's tight. Your air vents are not clogged with anything. Your stall warning horn is properly working. Your lights, you would turn those on, especially if you're doing a night flight. Check to make sure your lights are okay. You put your hand on this leading edge and you walk around the aircraft, and you literally feel that leading edge, and you're feeling for any bumps or inconsistencies or anything that just doesn't look right. If it's a cold morning, you're feeling for frost, making sure there's no icing, that type of thing on it. You'd have your lights on again if you're checking your lights, especially if you're going to fly at night. Then you're going to walk up underneath the wing here. You can't really see it on the simulator, but right up in this crevice, up in the ailerons, there is bolts and there's brackets. And those bolts need to be tight, and they also have to be safety tied. So you want to make sure that's done also. The same thing with the flaps here. They also have to have the bolts on there, and they're all safety tied. Check your baggage door. Make sure that it's closed, it's locked. The airframe, you put your hand along the side of it, make sure there's no dents or dings or anything like that. Your horizontal and vertical stabilizers, especially on the leading edges, you're making sure that there's, again, no dents, dings, any cracks, nothing like that. Coming around, there's going to be more brackets and bolts and safety ties along this rudder, along the rudder and the elevator, so you're going to check that. And then when you get to the other side, you're doing everything we just did with that first side, but doing the same thing again. And then the last thing you would be checking is your oil. So usually there's a little spot where you can take the dipstick out. You're going to check your oil. And then you also have sumps. And there's sumps on the wings and one at the lowest point on a 172. And you're putting a strainer up there, and you're putting that up into that sump, and you're draining out some aviation fuel. It's 100 low lead on these. You're making sure it's a nice blue tint, but there's no water in there. It doesn't smell funny. There's no contaminants. You make sure your fuel's is clean and clear. And that's just kind of a fast overview of an outside walk around. So let's jump on board and get to it. All right, when you first get inside the aircraft, what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that all the switches are in the off position. On the 172 and on most of the aircrafts and X-Plane and most of these simulators, you can remove the yoke. So you can see how I can push it back and forth. So I'm going to just take it out because it's easier to see what I'm doing here. So I'm going to look right over here. I'm going to make sure the master's off, the avionics are off, the backup battery is off. I'm also going to make sure that all my switches are in the down position. That's the off position. I'm going to look at all my circuit breakers and I'm going to run along them, make sure that everything's fine there and that none of them are popped out. That my key is in the off position. It's not on either mag, it's not on start. And then for the throttles, I'm going to make sure that my throttle is not in. So like this. Make sure my mixture, same thing, is not in. You don't want it in this position. You want both those out. My flaps should be in the up position. My static air should be pushed in. My trim, we'll be checking this more than once, but if it's not on this little arrow, you want to make sure it is. And then on the fuel tanks, the fuel shutoff, make sure that's in. And then on the fuel tanks, you don't want left and you don't want right. You want that straight up on both. And then of course, things like the doors, you want to make sure the doors are locked and closed. And then from that point, we're ready to actually start working through our actual pre-flight. So that checklist that I told you, go ahead and bring that up. I'm bringing up my checklist. Now, when you first start doing this, you're probably going to have to read through the actual checklist. But once you get used to working around the plane, flying the 172 a lot, the best way to do it, and this is how most pilots do their checks, is you'll get used to doing a flow. And what you'll do with that flow is I'm going to show you here in a second, you're going to flow through everything, but then you go back and you check your checklist and make sure that you didn't miss anything. So that's what I'm going to do right now, and then we're going to go back and double check the checklist. Again, for starting out, when you're not within this lesson, you might want to just use the checklist and walk right down it until you get used to checking all the different items that you're supposed to. All right, we're going to go up in the left-hand corner here, and we're going to do a test. This is of the backup battery. And then we're going to go ahead and we are going to turn on our master. All right, so the master's on. At this point, we can drop down full flaps. All right. Our beacon can come on. And that's just basically telling everybody that we're in the aircraft, we're getting close to ready to start it up. It shows everybody to just kind of a warning to avoid the aircraft before we start it. So the beacon's on, the master is on. We're checking right here to make sure that everything is proper. There shouldn't be anything that's lit up right now. There shouldn't be any oil pressure. All this is normal, that it's not in the green right now. You're checking the volts. The volts are fine. All right. And then we can go back off with the master for right now. All right, so now what we want to do is we want to start the engine. So we're going to, we've already tested our backup battery. We're going to go ahead and arm that. We're going to go master on, and then you're going to go the beacon will go on, and then fuel pump will go on. You're going to crack the throttle. Just about a fourth of an inch or so, and then you're going to go ahead and bring the mixture full forward. And what we're looking for is a positive fuel flow right here on this first line where it says fuel flow. And then we do have that, so it's just about 5 seconds, and then we're gonna bring the mixture all the way back. So your mixture should be back where it is right here. All right, fuel pump's gonna go off, and now we're gonna go ahead and go for a start. So what you wanna do is, this is gonna be your key right here. You can hover over it and turn it by clicking your button. Hopefully you actually have a joystick or something that you can map that button to. It's a lot easier. But if you don't, just hover over it. And then same thing with the mixture. Hopefully you have a throttle quadrant, or you've assigned that to 2 different keys for increase and decrease mixture. That's what you want, because you're gonna have to push that forward, advance it forward as you turn the key to this last position. So, oh, and then also before you start, make sure the brake's on. All right, going ahead, and I'm gonna crank it over and advance the mixture. All right, good start. You go back off the starter and then go to both. First thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the oil pressure, so we make sure that that is advancing, that it's coming up. If it's not, you immediately should bring that mixture back and then turn off the aircraft. Fuel or oil temperature will start rising. Fuel flow is a positive. The vacuum will come into play here once we increase the RPMs a little bit. And then RPMs for idle on a 172 is 1,000. So we're going to bring that up. Give or take a little bit is fine, as long as you get close to 1,000. It's kind of hard to get it exact in these simulators. So, all right, after that, we're going to go ahead and turn on our alternator. Both our avionics can come on, and I want you to note something. When I turn on these avionics on this G1000 suite, which is a Garmin suite, X-Plane's version of it, but it's really highly accurate. You're going to see all our engine gauges right here. They're going to flip to over here. So watch. All right, see how it happens? It brings over here. So what this is this is a primary flight display. This is all the critical information that we need. This is our things that we need to fly, and then the multifunction display is what we call this side. This is going to be for things like our flight plan, our mapping, our topography, watching other air traffic, NEXRAD, which is weather, those type of things. That's what this secondary display is for. All right, now that we have the engine started, what we're going to do is bring the flaps back up. So you can manually do it here, or if you have it mapped like I do, just use your whatever button you have it mapped to. So we're going to bring those up. Okay, and your fuel pump should be off at this point. And now we're just going to set up the aircraft to do our initial taxi and roll out down the taxiways to go do our run up. So I'm going to go over just some basic information on the G1000. I'm not going to go in depth on this. The reason why is it's not something that you're going to use on your initial training. This is more advanced stuff. So when we get into the navigation and some more of the advanced concepts after we get done with all the initial stuff, and we'll go into depth on the G1000 system. But for right now, just know, first of all, on the right hand side here, I call these ticker tapes. This is your altitude. So it goes in increments of 100. So, and then obviously in between, but the main numbers you can see there are hundreds. So 200, 300, 400, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, and that's going to show on this tape. Whatever's in the black here is the altitude that you're at. Don't get that confused with this number up on the top that's in the green. That number is actually for your autopilot, so you're not going to pay attention to that right now. Off to the right hand side is your vertical speed, and this tells you how fast the plane is increasing in altitude or decreasing in altitude. So 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 1,000, 1,500. Typically in a 172, you're going to be seeing between 500 and 1,000, either increasing or decreasing. On the left hand side here is your airspeed, and then it has a it's colored, and those colors I'll show you down here. It's a little easier to see on the backup airspeed indicator, but they have a meaning. And then down below that is your directional gyro, and or heading indicator is called, and that actually shows you the heading that you're going. Now the one up here is also a compass. That's your magnetic compass. The difference between these two is, in the old days in the steam gauges, this was a gyro basically operated. Now everything's computerized, electric, but this will basically keep consistent. This is a little bit harder to read because everything's backwards on it, so to speak. I'll show you when we're actually flying. And then there can be hesitation in it, meaning that it takes a while to either catch up to you or it's going faster than your turn depending on what direction you're going. All right, and then your engine instruments, as you know, on the right hand side here. And your comm radios, we're not going to do communications because remember, aviate, navigate, communicate. Communications, the last thing that we're going to do. We'll probably do some with PilotEdge and some without, to show you how it is to talk to ATC or announce yourselves in a non-towered airport environment. So down below here are your backup instruments. This is your airspeed, your attitude, and your altitude. So this one is just like the one that I showed you up here. Same exact reading. It should be set the same once we set the barometer. The attitude, actually I didn't show you that on the above one. So the attitude is right here. So all this brown area, this whole thing is one big attitude indicator. That brown is your ground and the blue is the sky. Same thing here. Brown is the ground, blue is the sky. The little yellow marks here are your wings, just like here, the red on here are your wings, red orange. You want to set those so as long as it's just right on the horizon or so, just a little bit above it, just like this one. This is just a little bit above it, and that's going to automatically set on this one. Your airspeed indicator, that has actually several different settings on it. Okay, so you're gonna see this white, this green, this yellow, and this red. Okay, on the white arc right here, at the bottom of the arc is your stall speed in a landing configuration. So that means you have your flaps fully down, you have landing gear, the landing gear's down, you're set up and configured for a stable approach, wings level. That's going to be your stall speed on the bottom end of that. And I'll go more into depth in stalling and how a plane stalls and angle of attack and all those things later. At the top of that is your stall speed in a clean configuration. So that means no flaps down, landing gear is stowed away if you have retractable landing gear. The 172 doesn't, but that's your stall speed in a clean configuration. The green arc right here, that's your normal operating range. So anywhere in that range, you're flying the airplane. I mean, that's your normal operating range that you're going to be within while you're flying that aircraft. So things like 74 knots on takeoff, 60 to 65 coming over the threshold as you're landing, those type of things. At the very top of the green arc, into the yellow, that's going to get into your operating speed. At the very top of it is basically your never exceed speed. So that red one at the end of the yellow arc, you never want to exceed that speed. At the bottom of the yellow, that's max structural cruising speed. So you don't want to go above that. And then the yellow arc is caution, meaning that, hey, you're getting too fast, you need to slow this thing down, get back in the green arc. Now, this plane in level, normal cruise, you're going to be fine. The plane's going to stay, it's designed to operate within that normal range. It'd be really hard to push it past the green arc there. But if you're diving, or you drop into a stall, or you get into some kind of unnormal configuration, and you're in a weird attitude or something, you could easily go over that green arc, and you got to make sure that you get the power back or do whatever you have to do to get back in that green arc. All right, let's move on here. So we are at the point where we actually get to taxi this down to the end of the runway. And what we're going to do is we are going to taxi it right now. We're going to get to the end of the runway, and then we're going to do a run up. So the run up I'm going to actually do in the next video, because this video is starting to get a little bit long. We're pushing a half hour already. And we're going to do the run up, and we're going to do the takeoff in the next video. So let's taxi it. You can put your yoke back if you want. Just click right here. Our flaps are up. All right, so you're just double checking, make sure everything's good. You can also turn on at this point your taxi light. It's always good to have your taxi light on when you're taxiing around, and your strobes can come on. Your nav lights were in daylight, so we don't have to turn those on. We'll leave that off. Your fuel pump is off. Your PDOT heat, you can turn that on a bright sunny day. I don't need it so much, but it's good practice to turn it on. So, and then you could adjust your dim on the panel lights if you want to do that right here. All right, get your feet on those rudders and let's get ready to taxi. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to release the brake. So either by manually coming down here and releasing it, clicking on it, or hopefully you have it mapped to a button already, and or you have a yoke and it's mapped to one of the buttons on the yoke or your pedals. So you're going to click that off. She's going to start rolling forward. The first thing you want to do is hit the brakes, tap them, make sure the brakes are working, and then let go. So in an airport environment, you're going to want to clear left, clear right before you start moving. And we're clear. You can see a truck way down there, but he's no factor right now. I'm going to start bringing the throttle up. Always look where you're going. That's another reason to have everything mapped correctly. I'm using basically my hat button on my yoke. It actually works really well for views. So you're going to feel the 172 kind of hesitate, jump around a little bit when you first start going. That's just that nose wheel. You can use some differential braking and stuff, hitting one brake or the other to kind of bring it around. So you're going to follow the yellow lines. It's not like driving around a car. You just don't drive anywhere. Think about this like being on a roadway, but you're following the actual line instead of lines dividing up the highway. You're following the yellow lines and staying on those. The reason you're doing that is that keeps you away from any obstructions. You're guaranteed on those yellow lines not to hit anything. You still got to watch out for other planes, but you're not going to hit buildings or other planes that are parked and that kind of thing. Use your brakes if you start getting a little too fast. And then you're going to turn to the right. We're going down to runway 29er here in Petaluma. Alright, and as you're taxiing, this one doesn't have steam gauges, so we don't really have to set our compass, but if it was steam gauges, which are like those backup instruments that I was showing you on an older airplane where you see all the gauges, those are steam gauges instead of having like electronic ones like the G1000 we have right here. You would actually move back and forth, and you can still do this in this plane. Just make sure that your heading indicator is matching up with that magnetic compass. So you're just looking above, and as I go to the right here, I can see it's going to 120. Same thing on the bottom, and as I go left, it's going more towards east, and it is on the top also. And you can just generally look at your instruments, make sure everything's in the green, watch out for other planes, that kind of thing. So we're going to get down to the end here, and then on the next video, we'll pause it, give you a break, then you can join that next video. Everything's going to be in playlist, by the way. So I'm going to put this in one playlist on YouTube so you can access all these in order. And as I add new ones over the next several weeks, since we're going to go all the way up to advanced, I'll keep on putting them in that same playlist for you. Alright, we're going to slow down a little bit here. You start tapping the brakes a little bit to slow down. And what you want to do at this particular airport, we're going to just clear our right. We're going to pull way over to the side here. And what this does is this is going to get us out of the way of any other airplanes. It's going to let us do our run up over here. And again, this might be a simulator, but when you start doing things like using VATSIM or PilotEdge, you're going to have other sim pilots on the system, and you don't want to be in the way of any of these taxiways out here, because they could be trying to get by, especially if they're working with PilotEdge or something like that. Alright, so you should be right now at the end of runway 29er in Petaluma, California, and you should be preparing to do the run-up. So take a break, join that next video, and we'll do a run-up and do our takeoff. Catch you on the next video.